Diane Keaton's death left Hollywood reeling, but perhaps no one felt the loss more deeply than her son, Duke Keaton. The 25-year-old was seen leaving his late mother's Los Angeles home just one day after her shocking passing, dressed in all black as he mourned privately. His quiet demeanor and solemn steps reflected the weight of grief that comes with losing not just a parent, but an icon, a woman celebrated for her wit, individuality, and creative brilliance. Duke's choice of attire, dark clothing complemented by 2 silver cross necklaces, seemed to serve as both a tribute and a reflection of his mother's unmistakable style. The layered crosses were reminiscent of Diane's signature devoted nun aesthetic, a look she perfected throughout her career that became as legendary as the woman herself. Those who knew Diane Keaton best knew her love of fashion was never about trends or glamour. It was about expression. Her closet, often filled with tailored trousers, crisp white shirts, wide-brimmed hats, and endless pairs of sunglasses, was an extension of her personality, quirky, bold, and unapologetically unique. Even in mourning, her son seemed to echo that authenticity, quietly honoring her legacy through small details that spoke volumes. To the public, it was an image of a son in grief. To those who understood Diane Keaton's world, it was an act of love and respect. Diane's passing at the age of 79 stunned fans across the globe. For decades, she embodied a kind of Hollywood that felt both classic and refreshingly real, a rare blend of vulnerability and strength that made her one of the most beloved figures in film. Known for her unforgettable roles in Annie Hall, The Godfather, Something's Got to Give, and The First Wives Club, Diane Keaton's career spanned generations. She brought humor, intelligence, and depth to every character she played. But it was her off-screen authenticity that resonated most deeply with those around her. According to a family spokesperson, Keaton passed away on a Saturday, surrounded by loved ones. The cause of death remains unclear, but insiders shared that her health had been in decline for several months. In her final months, she was surrounded only by her closest family, who chose to keep things very private. A source close to the family told People that even longtime friends weren't fully aware of what was happening. The secrecy surrounding her condition was characteristic of Diane's preference for privacy, especially in her later years. While she lived a life in front of the camera, her personal world remained tightly protected, a boundary her children and friends always respected. Still, some in her circle noticed subtle changes that hinted something might be wrong. Earlier this year, Keaton quietly listed her beloved Los Angeles home, often referred to as her dream home, for $29 million. To those who knew her well, that decision was out of character. She had spent years designing and renovating hers, often showcasing her keen eye for architecture and art in design magazines. She loved her homes, one close friend said. Letting go of one meant something had shifted. In recent months, she was also noticeably absent from her Brentwood neighborhood, where she was often spotted walking her dog daily. The absence was felt among locals who had grown used to her presence. Always stylish, always smiling, and always wearing her signature hat and oversized sunglasses, no matter the weather. She loved her neighborhood, a neighbor shared. Up until just a few months ago, she'd walk her dog every day. Friends who saw her in the weeks before her passing noticed a visible decline in her health. Longtime friend and songwriter Carol Bayer Sager shared with People that she was shocked by how frail Diane had become. She had lost so much weight, Sager said, recalling their last meeting just a few weeks earlier. She had to go to Palm Springs because her house had been damaged inside following the Palisades wildfires, and when she came back, I was kind of stunned by how much weight she'd lost. For those closest to her, Diane Keaton's decline was heartbreaking, but also deeply personal. She was not someone who wanted pity or spectacle. Her family's decision to keep her health private reflected her lifelong desire to control her narrative, to be remembered for her art, her humor, and her enduring individuality rather than her illness. And that's precisely how her son Duke seems determined to honor her. Duke Keaton, who was adopted by Diane in 2001 when he was just an infant, grew up surrounded by love, creativity, and the quiet strength of a mother who defied convention at every turn. Diane often spoke fondly of her children, Duke and his sister Dexter, calling them her greatest joys and the truest reflections of who she was. She never married, famously saying she didn't need a husband to feel complete. but motherhood gave her life a new sense of meaning. She described raising her children as the most fulfilling experience of her life. "Being a mother is the greatest thing that ever happened to me," she once said. "They changed everything." Now, as Duke mourns her loss, those words echo with new poignancy. The world sees him as the son of a legend, but to him she was simply Mum. The woman who made pancakes on Sundays, who laughed at her own jokes, who collected hats her death, calling her irreplaceable. Other industry colleagues shared memories of her humour, kindness, and fearless individuality. Social media lit up with clips of her most beloved performances. Annie Hall in her oversized trousers and tie, Erica Barry crying and laughing in Something's Got to Give, and the charming chaos of the First Wives Club. Yet amid all the praise and remembrance, the most touching tributes come from those who knew her best, her family. For Duke, every object left behind in her home, every photograph, every song holds a piece of her. The silver crosses he wore that day were more than accessories. They were symbols of faith, continuity, and connection. They embodied the essence of Diane Keaton, stylish, spiritual, a little unconventional, and utterly unforgettable. As the days pass, Duke is said to be taking time to process the loss away from the public eye. Close family friends have shared that he's finding comfort in revisiting his mother's journals, home movies, and favourite albums. Music, much like film, was central to Diane's life. She often said that certain songs could capture emotions she couldn't express in words. In her absence, those songs have become Duke's refuge, a way to feel her presence in the quiet moments between grief and remembrance. Though Diane Keaton is gone, her legacy endures not only in her films, but in the hearts of those who loved her most. Her fearless individuality, timeless wit, and deep love for her family will continue to inspire generations. For Duke, that legacy is both a comfort and a challenge, to live with the same authenticity and courage that defined his mother's life. In the stillness of his mourning, surrounded by the echoes of her laughter, and the memories that fill every corner of her home, he carries forward the light she left behind. Diane Keaton's death marks the end of an era in Hollywood, the loss of a true original. But in her son's quiet strength, her spirit endures. She once said that life is about embracing your eccentricities and finding joy in the imperfection of it all. As Duke navigates the grief of losing her, that wisdom remains his guiding star. In every memory, in every quiet walk past her old home, in every silver cross that catches the light, Diane Keaton lives on. Diane Keaton lived a life that redefined what it meant to be a woman in Hollywood, fiercely independent, endlessly creative, and unafraid to defy expectations. The Oscar-winning star of Annie Hall and Something's Got to Give was not only a cinematic icon but also a devoted mother to her two children, Dexter and Duke, both of whom she adopted later in life. Her passing has left an unfillable void in the hearts of her children and fans alike, but her legacy as a mother and trailblazer endures. Keaton adopted her daughter Dexter in 1996 and her son Duke in 2001, both after she had already established herself as one of Hollywood's most respected and admired actresses. Unlike many who chose motherhood early or within marriage, Diane took a different path, one that reflected her unique personality and deep introspection about what family meant to her. "Motherhood was not an urge I couldn't resist," she told Ladies' Home Journal years ago. "It was more like a thought I'd been thinking for a very long time. So I plunged in." That quiet admission revealed something deeply authentic about Diane Keaton. She was never one to do something because the world expected it of her. She made choices on her own terms, whether it was how she dressed, how she loved, or how she chose to build her family. Adopting children in her 50s was not a symbol of defiance, but an act of courage and love. "I was never going to be prepared to be a mother," she once said. That humility and honesty made her so relatable, despite her enormous fame. For Diane, motherhood wasn't about perfection. It was about connection, patience, and the simple joy of nurturing two lives. She once described her children as the best part of everything, explaining that they grounded her in a way no career accomplishment ever could. Her home was filled with laughter, photographs, art, and the kind of organized chaos that comes with raising kids. Friends often said that while Diane was meticulous about design, she was delightfully easygoing as a mother, never taking herself too seriously, always encouraging her children to be who they were, without judgment or pressure. Diane's choice to become a mother without a partner was particularly striking in an industry where image and conformity often rule. But to her, independence was not an act of rebellion. It was simply who she was. "I think I'm the only one in my generation, and maybe before, who has been a single woman all her life," she told People in 2019. "It wouldn't have been a good idea for me to have married." There was no regret in her voice, only clarity, the kind that comes from a life lived fully and freely. Throughout her career, Diane Keaton was famously linked to several of Hollywood's most celebrated men, including Al Pacino, Warren Beatty, and her Annie Hall co-star and director, Woody Allen. Yet despite her high-profile romances, she remained steadfast in her belief that marriage wasn't right for her. "One day you're going to make a good wife," someone once told her in high school, and I thought, "I don't want to be a wife," she recalled with her characteristic humour. That sense of self-awareness, even from a young age, defined much of Keaton's life and career. She refused to fit into any mould, not as an actress, not as a woman, and certainly not as a wife. Her relationship with Al Pacino was one of the great Hollywood love stories of its time, passionate, complex, and ultimately unfinished. The two met while filming The Godfather and fell deeply in love, maintaining a bond that would last decades. Even after their romance ended, their admiration for one another never faded. Pacino once admitted marrying Diane was one of his greatest regrets, a sentiment that spoke to the deep affection he still held for her. But for Diane, love didn't need to be sealed by a ring or ceremony. She found fulfillment in the connections she nurtured and the life she built on her own terms. When she adopted Dexter and Duke, her focus shifted entirely. Fame, awards, and acclaim became secondary to the daily joys and challenges of raising her children. She spoke often about the small, tender moments that made motherhood meaningful, making breakfast together, helping with homework, or spending evenings talking about life. To her, those moments were richer and more rewarding than any standing ovation. Friends say Diane found a renewed sense of purpose in motherhood. She loved that her children were growing into their own people, independent, kind, and creative. Dexter, her eldest, is now 29 and married, living a life grounded in love and simplicity, much like her mother. Duke, now 25, has largely stayed out of the public eye, but those who know him say he shares his mother's quiet strength and her deep artistic soul. In every sense, they are her legacy, not just her children, but reflections of her spirit and the values she held dear. Even as she aged, Diane never lost her curiosity or zest for life. She embraced getting older with the same humour and candour she brought to her films. "Getting older? It's a trip," she once said with a laugh, "but you've got to take it. There's no turning back." Her children often teased her for her quirks, her endless collection of hats, her love for photography, her obsession with home design, but they adored her for it. She was, in their eyes, not just a mother, but a friend, a guide, and a constant source of laughter and wisdom. Those who visited her home often described it as warm and filled with stories. Every object had meaning: photographs from film sets, art pieces from her travels, drawings from her children. She had a deep appreciation for beauty, but even more so for sentiment. Her kids' childhood artwork was displayed proudly alongside her prestigious awards, proof that in Diane's world, love mattered more than accolades. As her health began to decline in recent months, her children reportedly stayed by her side. The bond between them was unshakable, forged not by blood, but by directly from her mother. In each of them lives a piece of Diane, her humour, her heart, her boundless creativity, and her defiance of convention. Hollywood has lost one of its brightest lights, but Diane Keaton's spirit remains as vivid as ever. She changed the way women were seen on screen. Quirky, complicated, intelligent, imperfect, and real. She also changed how women could see themselves in life, proving that fulfillment doesn't come from following tradition, but from listening to your own voice. Diane Keaton's story is not just about fame or film, it's about a woman who lived authentically, loved deeply, and embraced life with both hands. She built a family that didn't fit the traditional mold, but was rich with love and meaning. She lived without regret, laughed often, and found beauty in imperfection. Her children will forever be her living legacy, reminders of the woman who chose love on her own terms, motherhood in her own time, and life in her own unique way. Diane Keaton never needed to be a wife to feel complete. She was already whole, an artist, a mother, a dreamer, and a force of nature who taught the world that being yourself unapologetically is the greatest role of all.